Captain Cusick, thank you so much. Lieutenant Colonel Petskowski, would you mind introducing yourself and then giving us a 5-minute kind of 30,000 foot view of State of the Union in the Army?
Great, thanks, Aaron. Apologize for being late. I was sitting in front of Dr. Woodson. He was giving us a talk, and I looked down at my watch and said, it's exactly 3 o'clock. I've got to run out of the room. I'm in the front row. Oh, well. Mike Bakowski, I am a Army 60 November stationed at Fort Sam Houston. I am the chief of the Department of Anesthesiology here at America's only level 1 DoD trauma center. I am originally from the Northeast, went to West Point for undergrad, went to USIS, graduated in 2008, and then got accepted for residency here at Brooke Army Medical Center. Spent my 4 years here, went to Walter Reed to do the regional anesthesia and acute pain fellowship for a year, and then returned back here for 2 years. Had the opportunity to go to Tripler with my wife, who's an orthopedic surgeon. Spent 3 years out there seeing a different way from a large med center. And then came back here in 2018, and then about 18 months ago, I became the chief of the service here and in charge of the market here. So trying to coordinate anesthesia services between BAMC, the ISR Burn Center, Wolford Hall Ambulatory Surgical Center is still kind of run by the Air Force, and a couple different URSAs. So a lot of things in a lot of different places. And about the same time, I picked up the deputy consultant job working with Colonel Ruffin, who was my anesthesia chief when I was out at Tripler. So I know him very well. So the state of Army anesthesia is we are growing, and we are intent to grow. Probably about 10 years prior, we were kind of at a standstill as far as manning, potentially contracting. There was basically a comeuppance for a lot of different AOCs of whether you were going to survive as an entity, whether you're going to get smaller and go away completely. And it was certainly our intent that we would not watch Army anesthesia go quietly into the night. Thankfully, we have seen our authorizations for primary residencies and fellowships grow over the last 3 years. Especially now with this year, we had our first civilian residency program position that we've had since probably the late 90s. So we are growing in all of those aspects, and then our intent to continue to do that. We want you to grow as clinicians. We are pushing that with our requirements for ICTLs, requirements to maintain the TE and TTE skills that you learn in residency. That is part of the things you're going to have to do now. We want to see you be the best clinician you can be. I am training you to be an anesthesiologist for the next 30 years. That's what I'm looking at for you. You will not spend those all in uniform. Most of you will probably spend your 4 and maybe decide to leave. But some of you will stay and be reservists, and that's a win for me. Some will go on a 20, maybe. Fewer and fewer these days, but some will stay in the reserve. That is a win. Some of you will leave and go into the VA system. That is also a win. You're taking care of dependents. Most of you will stay in the United States taking care of America's sons and daughters for the next 30 years, and you'll be part of our nation's response when needed. So that is our primary concern, is making sure that you have great training while you're in residency, exposure to those fellowships, and that you have a successful career while you're in the military, to be a successful anesthesiologist, but also a military officer. So that is really where we're at. As far as assignments that are coming out of residency, it's really key for you to speak with your program leadership of where you are and what you want to do. Really thinking about your ability to train in a fellowship. Almost everybody has some interest in doing something other than general anesthesia. We really want to push those fellowships to say, hey, can I broaden my skill set? Is there an opportunity for me to do that? And when is the right time to do that? I know the ones in the Army that we key on is critical care and pain management. Those are the ones that are most apparent, but there are opportunities for other ones, and that's our job to help fight for more of those authorizations, and those are growing every year. So I believe we're in a good position to have 3 this year and try to do more. As far as your assignments, my really intent is to send you to a place where you're going to get good exposure from the breadth and depth of anesthesia specialties. I'm really not interested in trying to send you to a 1-man or a 2-person shop. I really don't want to see you at an ASC. There are certain limitations, Army married couples, okay, EFMP things that really force hands as far as that goes. But our intent is to get you to a good place where you can get some grow into the skill set you have, become board certified, and then basically go from there as far as your needs as a clinician, as a leader, and what the Army needs as you grow and learn to mentor the next generation. So unfortunately for me, it's not about running around and doing cool stuff for me. It's not about what I want to do. It's about how I can help others grow and how I can lead them. So I recognize my time, even as a junior 05, is it's not about me. It's about you guys and gals. So that's what it's all about, is how can we develop and mentor you as a anesthesiologist and a military officer. And I'll cut it off there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Petskowski. Colonel Ruffin, I know you're on the line as well. Just wanted to give you a brief second in case you had anything you wanted to add. And assuming not, we'll move on to the Air Force and Colonel Corey Bodley. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, sir, and then giving us a 5-minute overview of Air Force anesthesia. And I know you have slides, and I'll be prepared to pull them up when you cue me.
Perfect. Thank you, Major Tracy. I'm Corey Bodley. I am currently stationed at Nellis Air Force Base right near Las Vegas, Nevada. I also have on with me Lieutenant Colonel Elizabeth Dwyer, who is one of my deputy consultants, and Lieutenant Colonel Mark Liu, who's my other deputy consultant. Elizabeth is stationed at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, and Mark is in the mountains of Colorado and at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. So we kind of we're spread over the country. The reason I have 2 deputies is I will be stepping down within the next year, certainly, from consultant job due to some other jobs the Air Force has given me. So hopefully either Dr. Dwyer or Dr. Liu will be taking over for me when I step down. So they're here to answer questions if need be, and also to just continue, get some continuity. If you could pull up those slides for me, Major Tracy, I'll run through a couple things that are currently going on in the Air Force. While she's doing that, one of the first things I want to bring up is we have quite a few locations that are options. It's really a fluid situation which ones have openings each year, because it'll depend somewhat on how many people decide to leave. We're a little bit different than the other services. The last few years, we've had more people choosing to stay in than ever before. So our retention is very good right now, which I'm very grateful for. But it also causes an issue with there are not quite as many openings as sometimes we might think there will be at certain bases. So that's a little bit of a fluid situation. Next slide, please, Aaron. Okay, so this is the bases that we have, and I'm sorry it's a little bit small, but hopefully you can zoom in on it and see the numbers that are there. Like I say, are not set in stone, but those are what it looks like right now as far as openings that we'll have this year. Now, I know that those of you who are online with us are in different stages of training, so a lot of you this will not apply to, but you can at least get an idea of where we have bases and for this year, which bases I anticipate openings at. Now, the other part of that is just because there are no openings at a particular base doesn't mean I can't put anybody there. And I'll get into that in just a little bit as to why we have an overage of anesthesiologists in the Air Force, actually. Next slide, please. So we also have currently 4 different locations where we have civilian partnerships, and there's more to come. We're working on opening up some more. It's a little bit slower than we thought, but one of the reasons we need these civilian partnerships is because we have about twice as many CCAT UTC authorizations as we have anesthesiologist authorizations. So we're training anesthesiologists as quickly as we can, and we don't even have places to put them all at military MTFs. So we're opening up partnerships at trauma centers across the country, and that way we're able to help our civilian counterparts as well as get top of the line training for those who are stationed there. And then we rotate military active duty anesthesiologists through these sites with the military sponsors to keep up trauma skills. So right now we have the 3 sites, Baltimore, Cincinnati, and St. Louis, for C-STARS trauma platforms. And then we have a brand new CCAT platform also in St. Louis. Next slide, please. I wanted to just throw up the 7 different fellowships that we're training for in the Air Force right now. Critical care is kind of the top of the list, and trauma. The Air Force is very interested in these, obviously, for obvious reasons. CT anesthesia is also one that's very popular. OB anesthesia and pediatric anesthesia, we need to maintain a certain number of those, primarily for our GME platforms, to be able to teach and adequately train our upcoming anesthesiologists. Then we have a pretty good contingency of chronic pain, fellowship-trained doctors, and then acute pain and regional anesthesia. Those are the big 7. Every once in a while, we get an odd kind of a different training platform or pathway, but those are the 7 main fellowship pathways that we're offering in the Air Force right now. Next slide, please. So as a consultant, I don't know if the correct term is to call this homesteading. I think different services use it differently. But the Air Force is strapped for money, like I think all services are, and they don't want to move us any more often than they need to. So I'm allowing people to stay put as long as they want in one place, as long as they meet these 4 criteria. So we've had people stay their entire career in one location if, first of all, they don't want to move. If you want to move after being in a place for 4 years, we'll help that happen. But if you don't want to move, you want to stay put for family reasons or whatever, that's number 1. Number 2, as long as you're in good standing with your local leadership, so you're doing your job, keep your nose clean and doing everything that's asked of you, and then some. And then number 3, and this is big on my books, you need to be deploying regularly. If you are at a location that is heavily tasked for deployments and you're not able to deploy, might need to move you to a different base so that we can move people in there to help continue bear that deployment burden. So that's number 3. And then number 4 is just your spot can't be DROS limited, which means this doesn't apply to overseas locations. All of our overseas assignments are DROS limited, and I can't keep you there more than maybe 1 extension on that. So I couldn't keep you there your whole career, for example. I think this serves both the Air Force by saving money as well as having a good contingency of continuity for patient care. And it also seems to, I think, keep the morale up among our anesthesiologists, those who want to stay in one location. Next slide. Just a little deployment update. The numbers of deployers each round are very fluid right now. We were very, very deployable. Right now we're in a little bit of a lull, but all the people who seem to be in the know say, just stand by, we're just about to start it up again. So we'll see. But the platforms for deployment are GST, which is our ground surgical teams. They're small, very mobile teams. Sorry about that. It's, very mobile teams who go out with, oftentimes with special forces or CIA groups, and are able to set up operation capabilities right near the battlefield and take care of people with life and limb-saving surgeries right near the battlefield. CCAT, I think most people are familiar with those, critical care air transport teams. That is probably the biggest platform for deployments right now in the Air Force, and very high visibility with the generals. EMEDS is our standard hospital deployments, and then we have IRF and DSURF capabilities as well, and people will be on the hook for those at different bases at different times. But the big take-home point here is that we're still quite deployable, and that's one thing that is the lifeblood of Air Force anesthesia. That's one reason why we're one of only 4 specialties in the Air Force that's growing right now. Every other specialty is shrinking in numbers, but our high deployment tempo has made us very relevant to those who control money and resources in the Air Force. So you will deploy if you are an Air Force anesthesiologist, and most likely quite early in your career after residency. And right now deployments are 6 months. We were making some progress in changing that to 4 months, but a new model of deployments has come out across the Air Force, and it's kept it at 6 months for now. Next slide. The other thing that's new is it used to be that everybody promoted up to lieutenant colonel 100% as long as you didn't get into major trouble. That's no longer the case in the Air Force. Now the promotion rate from captain to major is about 95%. Promotion rate to lieutenant colonel, I'm sorry, I've got those listed wrong on that slide, but to lieutenant colonel is about 90%. And then to colonel is about somewhere between 70 and 50%, depending on how many people are applying and how many openings they have. So it is now incumbent upon us to make sure that we are checking all the boxes that all of the line officers check, make sure that our OPRs are done correctly and that we are doing the educational opportunities that are there for us. Next slide, please. And I think that's all I have just in this quick overview. Mark or Elizabeth, if you want to add anything right now, feel free. And if not, we'll turn it back over to Major Tracy, and then we'll be available for questions.
Just wanted to say good afternoon, Elizabeth Dwyer at Eglin. Look forward to working with everyone going forward. Thanks.
And I believe Mark was not able to get his computer to work, so I think he's on the telephone line with us.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Team Air Force. We're going to move into some pre-submitted questions. And then once we've kind of gone through those with the various services, there will be a time for an open forum. So anybody on the line who has questions, just hold on to your hats. All right, I think the first and most commonly asked question that everyone has touched on to some degree is what is the detailers, this was written by a Navy person, what is the detailers or the consultant's process for giving assignments? Captain Cusick, do you think you'd be able to speak to that first?
In fact, it's a very timely question. We just published the list of opening billets as of yesterday, 2 days ago. Sorry, a little noisy here. And that went directly to the folks slated to move or be in or graduates. And on the basis of that, they've started to respond already with their wish lists, basically up to 10, and give us a rationale as to what they want and why. And that's going to be slated on to, do they need more support in terms of their board certification, deployments, co-location issues, EFMP concerns, whether they're applying for any other leadership aspects like Chief Medical Officer, SOCO, and beyond that, then we start to basically pencil in as best we can folks on the basis of what their need and interests may be. So again, it's not rank dependent. It is all about skill set and what is your professional need, and for the special ones, what have you done to earn it? That's about it.
Brief follow-up question. Is it helpful for you to have additional information about the nature of someone's rank list?
Absolutely. I'll always take more information.
We may be losing Captain Cusick for a second, but I think he said more information is always helpful. Lieutenant Colonel Petskowski, I'm going to throw you the same question. What is...
I can jump a little bit in there for Jeb, talking about wish lists. I can tell you for the Navy, Jeb and our detailers have for the last 2 years worked very, very, very hard to match people up with assignments where, not only are they going to be successful in the hospital, but also happy outside the hospital. We really recognize that, if your social and family life is healthy, you're going to definitely be, more productive and safe, at work. So, do not be shy about letting, Captain Cusick know if you have something going on or you have, a personal reason to want to be where you want to be. We really look at those things.
Yeah, my apologies. I think I not only have a bad connection here, but I'm also on my last legs with the battery here. So my apologies.
Understood. We're all familiar with the technical difficulties. Dr. Hodgson, thanks for stepping in to provide some insight. Dr. Dr. Piskowski, do you mind answering kind of the same question for the Army? What is your process for giving assignments? And then do you guys also prefer to have as much background as possible?
So yeah, it's also always helpful to know what's going on with the individual service member or what their family situation is. There's obviously certain categories within the Army that kind of dictate movements and how they can proceed. Like I said, EFMP, high school stabilization, dual Army married couples, those have some unique limitations that, we just have to work with. But for the, graduate who has no significant ties to one place or another, or significant driving reasons to keep them in a place, I really want to bring you to a place that has the full breadth of anesthesia services, so you can continue on honing the skills that you learned at Walter Reed and or BAMC. So the ones that look attractive for most people are places like Madigan, places like Tripler, places like Fort Bliss and Fort Bragg, where they have the full breadth of those services. And you're not necessarily every day with a resident that you've kind of split time with trying to teach in that. There are certain people that we will keep there at Walter Reed and keep at BAMC, but for the most part, I would like to send you a place where you get the full breadth and you'll be working on your own to really solidify your skills. And then as you become more senior or board certified, bring you back to those larger centers to teach because you have a proclivity at teaching, or taking you to other places where you can grow as a leader. But that's really my intent, is those larger places that have that full breadth of anesthesia services, where more days than not, you will be by yourself in the operating room and not worried about other people that you've got to coach, teach, mentor at the time until you're ready for it.
Thanks, Dr. Patz. Dr. Bodley, same question for you.
Okay, and the Air Force Personnel Command kind of reserves the last right on all of these assignments, but up till now, and it still looks good for the future, they've let the consultants determine all of the assignments for physicians, especially in anesthesiology. The way it works is in November, all of the graduating residents and fellows will get an email from AFPC with a blank wish list. And that on that preference sheet, it's important that you list all 16 or 18 bases that we have on that year from 1 to 18. But even more important, and this gets missed a lot of the time, is after that ranking list is a little section where it says comments or extra information. We look at that very heavily because there's almost every year there are a lot of people vying for a very few spots at some really sought after bases. And so we weigh heavily personal situations, and they can be just about anything. You can put in there, I just really want to go here because I want to experience this part of the country, or it can be because I have family situation that warrants this, that it would be much easier for us, or maybe there are opportunities there for your career progression that you want. Whatever you want, we put a lot of weight on those comments. So I can't emphasize that enough. Every year, about half of our graduates neglect to put anything in that section. And then you kind of turn into just a number on a piece of paper to us, and I don't like to do that with your futures. So make sure that you put in your comments. And then as far as after graduation from residency, we do have kind of a hierarchy of who gets those most sought after spots. And it's based on a combination of factors: rank, how long you've been out of residency, how many deployments you've done. And if you're coming back from overseas or you're a mill-to-mill partnership, those bump you up the rank a little bit. So those will all play into those final decisions when there's a dispute of 2 or more people vying for one authorization. Like I said earlier, we have way more anesthesiologists than we have actual authorizations. So we're double and triple booking some of our authorizations. And then we're doing TAAs with the civilian hospitals in the area to keep people getting cases. But our primary purpose for being there is to deploy on a CCAT team in most cases. Over.
Hey, Corey, I have a follow-up question.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, so when you say that, I think I know the answer, but you say that you have more anesthesiologists than you have billets for, so you're using civilian postings to keep people current, but the Air Force still has an unmet need for anesthesiologists because of the deployment demand. Is that correct?
Right. So just as an example, we have 96 authorizations for anesthesiologists. We currently have 132 anesthesiologists who are trained, but we have, the last I heard, and this number keeps climbing, 163 UTCs for CCAT. So we're not even filling all of our UTCs. So it's kind of a strange situation where we don't have billets for people, but we still are training more and more as fast as we can to be able to hit all of our deployment UTCs.
So you're around around 96 actual, 132 slots for 163 possible deployment.
Right. Yeah.
Billets. Okay.
Yeah. So we're training as fast as we can.
Okay.
We're recruiting every way we can because the Air Force sees a huge need for anesthesiologists, primarily, like I said, on the CCAT deployment platform.
Aaron, I'd just like to add something. This is a real difference between the services, and I think it'd be valuable to hear from the Navy and the Army how the billet structure varies from what is just described by Corey for the Air Force. Could you guys speak to how the billets are established, the numbers that exist, and what it's based on? Platforms versus CCAT missions versus deployment versus OCONUS work.
I can talk about Army one. So right now, ours is based off our Roll 3 authorizations. That is the spot that we have right now as far as operational requirements. There is, in the periphery, there is an opportunity potentially at looking at Roll 2, depending on how contingency goes, or our next large-scale combat operation. That is always a contingency. That is a reality. That's been a reality of our last major conflicts. Primarily, the Roll 2 positions are filled by 66 Fox CRNAs, but they have a problem with their own recruiting, and so in a lot of our previous engagements, 60 Novembers have been at Roll 3s and Roll 2 to meet the overall anesthesia needs mission. Like I said, currently we have an authorization for one at the field hospital. We just did a manning analysis for critical care requirements, the Roll 3, and the output of that working group that is front of the DSG is to triple the authorizations of 60 Novembers at the Roll 3. So going from 1 for every unit to 3 at every unit. So that is in the process of moving forward in conjunction with our critical care brethren and sisters, because we realized at the Army Roll 3, there's not enough critical care capability. When you put the surgical augmentation detachment and medical augmentation detachment together, you're looking at one pulmonary critical care doc for up to 40 to 50 beds. That's just not enough horsepower to take care of all those patients. And so 60 Novembers have been designated as ones that can easily step in and fill that gap until we can train the critical care providers. But that is certainly within our scope and practice as anesthesiologists, according to our privileges and credentials, that we can work in the ICU and take care of ICU patients when the MTF commander says that the need is there. And that's what we've done in COVID response, and that's what we'll be prepared to do. So we are looking to, again, expand our operational authorizations, triplicate, and that will drive and continues to help us drive our authorizations for residencies and fellowships. And right now, I think we're in pretty good standing with our DSG and the Director of Army GME. So with positive feelings that that will continue to increase as the years go forward.
Thanks, Dr. Skowski.
Aaron, this is Captain Cusick. I'm sorry, I lost the signal there, so I've called back in. Is it appropriate for me to go answer? Can you hear me?
Yeah, please, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, I heard some of the last two of my colleagues' answers, and I think I understood the question. Could I hear it one more time, just to exactly what was being asked?
Jeb, this
Hello?
is Arlene. The question is how Navy billet structure is based on. It's based on contingency platforms and deployment tempos and so forth. And so, that is it that or MTF billets?
It is. It's very much legacy, if you will, in many ways.
But yeah, so there's a lot on the basis of the MTF need, but by and large, yeah, increasingly driven by what is the operational need going to be vis-a-vis all the Marine Corps bought billets and then contingency type work. So you've got we've got upwards of 180 now authorizations, and we're billing somewhere in the 150s. So we certainly don't have the problem that Corey has with the Air Force. We wish we had that problem, but we're not there yet. But again, we also have the issue with we're bigger, but we're also spread thin in terms of all the Marine Corps and then MTF teaching programs. We've got three programs to man in terms of the teaching programs, and so that translates to a large requirement. Hope that is that sort of what you were looking for.
It is. And another question that comes up frequently that I would love to have the consultants speak to is something
Sure.
that, again, that Corey had mentioned earlier about the military-civilian partnerships that are being developed by all three
Absolutely.
services, and what that will mean for opportunities for our anesthesiologists, both for billets as well as for just training and skill sustainment.
Absolutely. So everyone, if you didn't hear earlier on, I served at the Navy's trauma program out at Los Angeles right after my fellowship. So big fan of the civil military collaboration. These facilities do not have oftentimes the limitations that we have either with acuity or with volume. So it is a great way toward skill sustainment and readiness. Big believer in it. Moving to different places, I've found that off-duty employment is a phenomenal way to maintain skills. And there are many possibilities there in terms of expanding those. I saw, from Corey's slides, of course, they've got the multiple the CSARS programs. We've started a second one up with 10 that I'm hoping will start to take some number of additional trainees. We've also started, we're starting something up at Cook County. We've had a footprint there for quite some time. I'm actually looking at one here in New Orleans. It's one of the reasons I took this job here, is to explore whether or not we could do one in a centrally located, warm city that is unfortunately seeing a lot more violence. So those sorts of opportunities are there. The problem that I've always run into with them, in my opinion, is you can have the most beautiful MOU written, but if they don't trust you, they don't know you, if you've not put in the face time to earn trust, then they're not going to give you a difficult airway. That's the gripe we hear from any of our civilian training programs is, I went there, it was useless to me. Well, that's because the faculty there hadn't invested the time to get you to the head of the bed. That's the problem that we're seeing. That's why CSTARS being embedded in a major center is such a win, because they go to work there, they live there, they're there to maintain skills and to make sure that the students that trail along behind them, it's like, yeah, Dr. Bodley, you saved me last week with that airway. Of course, you and your unnamed student who I've never seen before in my life, I'll trust you to this patient. So absolutely, those are diamonds in the rough, and I think they're definitely ways to. We're on our way toward doing more and more of that. I think the money pressures and the risk management pressures are going to push more and more into that sort of a model. Over. Still there?
Yep. Thank you. Real quickly, we kind of have chunks of questions. I wanted to go through a couple more questions about assignments, and then move on to some questions about fellowship, and then some further ones, and hopefully still have time for an open floor. For those of you who make agreements with people about perhaps taking a less desirable position with the idea of arranging a follow-on, like say, Captain Cusick, you were mentioning that Gitmo might not be the most desirable of locations for a Navy person. If a person takes an assignment with an understanding that there's going to be a specific follow-on tour or a desired follow-on tour, is there a way that this is tracked?
I'm sorry, is there a way to, what was the last part?
So say you have someone who has agreed to go to Guantanamo, with the understanding that they'll be getting on to whatever desired follow-on tour. Is there a way that you track this, given that the military sees a lot of turnover, or is it anything that's official, or is it just kind of a handshake?
For the most part, yeah, it's so far we've not more formalized it, but you know, a paper trail is always important. So I would advise anyone in that position to, you know, make sure you get it in writing, get it on paper, get it in email. In fact, I mean, that was the easiest, you know, set of orders have already gotten done. We've made a huge move to get orders out to people much earlier this year, hopefully by the end of September, because, you know, I know a lot of folks on the line, me too, you know, have been moving with like 2 months notice, and that just drives people out. That's not acceptable. I mean, we are competing for talent, so we want to keep you. We want to make you happy. We want to make you feel empowered and valued. So part of that is being respectful of your family and your needs and your personal lives. So Kim Burke out of Jacksonville asked if she could retour, and I said, hey, that's close to you know, there's a weekly flight out of Jacksonville to Guantanamo. You're also a flight surgeon. If you want to reaffiliate with the flight community and fly with the Guantanamo C-12s like I did when I was there this last tour, have at it. If you give me one good year down there, I guarantee you back to Jacksonville. And she said, absolutely. So she ponied up. She's down there now in her second month. And I just approved her orders this morning for retour at Jacksonville come next summer. Easiest thing in the world.
Perfect. Lieutenant Colonel Petskowski, do you guys do things again as kind of a handshake agreement in the Army?
We certainly discuss those opportunities. There are certain, you know, positions that are considered hardship tours. Certainly going to Korea with or without your family has some considerations. Certainly being up here in the ISR, the burn unit is a challenging place to work. And so we kind of look more favorably on some people who have taken those hardship tours of, you know, their opportunities afterwards are a little bit more broad than say just someone else. But our biggest thing that Colonel Ruffin has been really good at is making sure that all those communications between 60 Novembers and the consultants is, you know, deputies are CC'd on that, and that will continue as a legacy. So those things are not forgotten, which, you know, maybe that happened in the past. I remember when I was going as a resident of saying, hey, does one thing get lost between consultants? We've made it imperative that those things, the good and the bad, are not forgotten from consultant to consultant. So, you know, those things will endure. But yes, we do consider where you've been and what you've done on askings, and look favorably when you're able to support the community with your service.
Dr. Baddeley, would you concur with your consultant colleagues on this?
Yeah, it's completely solely tracked by the consultants in the Air Force, and it is a handshake deal. It's very rare for us to need to do this, though. The only tough to fill spot that we had in the past was Kadena Air Base, and that is now gone away, and we're moving everybody to Hawaii, to Hickam Air Force Base, and we have a lot of interest in that. So it's rare for us to need to do those kind of deals, but if we do, it just puts you up that much higher on the priority list, and usually I'll give those people their first choice back. They may not get to go to a place if there are no openings, but they get first choice of bases with openings.
I have a couple brief, easy questions here that I'll run through with all of you, and then we'll move to fellowship questions and then keep going. Is it better to write an email or call?
Email for me.
This Captain Cusick, email definitely much easier.
An email to the consultant, and usually will, depending on where, generate a phone call and a further discussion, but email, yes.
Does being chief resident make a difference for out of residency assignments?
I'll go first. I'm not located at our residency training platform, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know in many cases if a person was a chief resident or not. So I would say no. If you are a chief resident and I get a great report from your program director, of course that helps us know that you could survive in a really tough environment where you'll represent the Air Force well, and it might help in that way. But overall, I don't usually get that information.
Aaron, I'll say it can be an indicator of future potential, but that's got to be backed up by the OER and what your program director says, right? So there are occasions where someone comes in as chief resident and it doesn't seem to work out well. But in general, that's a good indicator of, you know, potential for success as an officer for a longer term career.
Would you agree, Captain Cusick?
So, and just so I'm clear on the question broke up. Is it value of chief resident?
Yes. Is it valuable with regards to first assignment out of residency?
Well, with first assignment, no. I mean, it's important in that I'm going to back up my colleagues here and say, more importantly, what am I going to get from the program director? Where they, you know, if they are, you know, the standout star, they're probably going to be chief resident regardless. But if they wanted to, if they're, you might get a program director who tells me this is my chief, I want to keep him. Okay, I will consider that. But also I might get this was my standout star, my chief resident, and they want to do this off the beaten track. I'm like, okay. And a lot of those folks should be looking at fellowships anyway. So it really, I mean, sustained superior performance is important, but I'm going to be relying on my program directors to tell me where will this person fit best from a skills and personality standpoint. Over.
And actually, it's great that you bring up fellowship. We'll start with you. Kind of two very related questions. If someone knows they're interested in fellowship, is that something they should talk to the consultant about? And do consultants have an impact on fellowship selection?
Yes and yes. Big fan of it, not only because more education is always important, but we always have to break ourselves out further from our colleagues on the CRNA side. There are specific jobs that we really want to have subspecialty trained folks for, not only in our teaching programs, but in certain specialty aspects in terms of pain or in terms of going to teach trauma. We're actually working on a program out of Navy Trauma Training Center in Los Angeles to do a constructive credit trauma fellowship, if you will, that basically people who are stationed in California, in Southern California, can get up to LA enough, then they can actually do enough cases to get the equivalency of a fellowship without us having to burn a slot there. Beyond that, I'd love to bring more cardiac back, but the risk with that is going to be, where do we put them then? Until we have enough good collaborative programs where we can put them in high volume centers in the civilian world, it's very tough to justify a lot of that. But no, please bring your interest, bring your application, let us know. And the demand signal, we're trying to get through the bean counters to say, the Marine Corps, the Navy wants this, they want more regionalists. Therefore, we have to have a requirement written for staffing that number of people to put at the medical battalions, for instance. So definitely let me know. Over.
Dr. Pat, same question for you.
Yes, critical. If you have an interest, let your consultant know as soon as you've got that inkling, because that that helps us shape our school year plan and what we want to go and basically ask for from senior leaders in the Army. So we have an interest of community-wide what we think is needed, but we also want to match what's going to be out there. I don't want to go in front of the DSG and say, I really need trauma fellowships if people are saying they don't want to do that. Or if I've got, hey, 2 or 3 people say they all want to do regional, I'm going to find a way to get them to that. So I really need to know what people are asking for, because there can be some wiggle room. There is an opportunity where if you have a unique talent and a unique need, that there are probably billets every year as far as fellowships and other programs that go unfilled. And so it's building up credit with those senior leaders in the GME world of saying, if I've got an opportunity and I know about it, what are the chances of getting one more in this slice or that slice? If we don't know about it, we can't war game for it. We can't ever make it a reality. So yes, please let your consultant know as soon as you're thinking about, hey, I want to do a fellowship.
Dr. Bodley, same question, and the add-on question that Dr. Petzkowski talked about a little bit was, are the fellowship spots that are released in the HPERB set in stone? Is there wiggle room? I know my fellowship slot was created back out of thin air when I did fellowship quite a while ago. Is the Air Force still pretty flexible in terms of making fellowships happen for those who are interested?
So yes, we're very kind of blessed in the Air Force in that the Air Force gives the consultant a lot of say in the fellowships. I can create a fellowship opportunity out of thin air, so to speak, as long as another one was not filled. I have a certain number of total fellowship spots, but for example, if all the CT fellowship spots don't get filled and I have an extra person wanting to do OB anesthesia, I can make an extra OB fellowship, no problem. And then the other thing is the Air Force is pretty liberal with their fellowships. I can't recall anybody wanting to do fellowship who was qualified and didn't get one. The Air Force will make it happen. And the reason is the Air Force looks at that as a retention tool. The longer we train somebody, the longer commitment they have to pay it back, and it's a retention tool. So that's kind of how the Air Force sees it. So it benefits everybody.
Captain Cusick, I just wanted to circle back to you with the same fellowship question. Are fellowship spots in the Navy set in stone, or is there some wiggle room?
It is to some degree, it's far more limited than we'd like. We had a great opportunity last year. We had a lot of it, I think, is personality driven by the Corps chief. We had banging on the table. We need more of this. We need more of that, and the money simply wasn't there. So it's unfortunate, but that was the hand we were dealt. I'm hoping we can continue to do that. I'm trying to increase that demand signal of, we must produce this, and this. I'm trying to also argue similarly for what Dr. Bodley is just enunciated there with it as a retention tool. We have not had that as much success yet. So there's more to come on that, but it is something I'm working on almost daily. Over.
Thanks, Captain Cusick. Dr. Bodley, I actually have a question specific to you. Is the active duty program in San Antonio for people who are applying to residency in the Air Force, is there any chance that it's going to increase its number of slots? And is the very new practice of putting Air Force residents at Walter Reed going to continue and potentially increase its slots in the future? Do you have a crystal ball you can look into to tell us about that?
Well, I think I can answer it somewhat. I don't know that there's a lot of room to increase slots down in San Antonio, and Dr. Petzkowski could probably speak to that. It's more limited capacity of cases to go around and to make sure that every resident is getting adequate training. It's not that they don't want more residents there. It's just we want to make sure we don't flood it too much and thin out everybody's experience. Now, Dr. Hodgson at Walter Reed has been great to work with us. It's a brand new opportunity for us to put some residents there, and we'll see how it goes. So far, he's indicated that he'd like to keep it going. So we hope to keep that going and possibly even grow in the future. Our pop-off valve, though, is to look for other opportunities. If we need more, then we have spots available in the active duty locations. We'll start sending more people to civilian training locations. We have looked at opening another residency in Las Vegas, and after doing an investigation process, decided it wasn't right at this time. So,
was that a civilian or site for you?
it was going to be mixed, half civilian, half military, and it was going to be through UNLV, the university in Las Vegas, and as well as the VA and the Air Force Hospital.
So, yeah. So, Walter Reed, it's going to be permanent. I mean, I'm very committed to, right now we have, 3 training slots for that, this past class, and 3 training slots for this upcoming class. And, we're very committed to, seeing that through as a permanent, training site for the Air Force. And I think I speak for our whole department and everybody at USU when, I say we see the real value in a tri-service program for all of our graduates.
Yeah, thank you.
And this is Captain Cusick. If I can tag on to that one, I think integration is the way of the future. In terms of John and I have talked a lot about bringing more residents into Bethesda. Walter Reed, and then we've also stationed. We've talked about stationing, tour swaps wherever. I think that's the way of the future. If we say for personal reasons or for assignment interest reasons that the places that I can send you in the Navy are thus, but if I need to send you to somewhere that the Air Force can house you and take care of you for a tour because of whatever the need might be, that in and of itself is another retention tool. I'm from Alabama. I even offered at one point when my mother was getting ill, could I go and do a tour at Fort Benning? And, I think those are the things we could actually move toward for the benefit of the entire force. Over.
Love that Purple Force concept. I want to make sure that we have time for some open forum. I know we're over an hour into this thing now, so if anyone needs to go, please feel free. If you do have a question you would like to ask any of the consultants, could you do me a favor and use the raise hand option in the Google Meets, and I will call on you and you can ask your question to your desired consultant.
And Aaron, if I could just say, I think my phone's going to die here momentarily. Please, if you need to reach out to me, please email me your question. Corey, corrycic.mil@usmc.mil. So I've got a new email address. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Dr. Cusick.
I'm going to ask a question that I get asked all the time from students and from residents and frankly, national faculty. What is the relationship now and going into the future with our CRNA colleagues? How do you see that relationship changing with regard to the value that the anesthesiologist brings to the care model?
I'll jump in there on this one. So luckily at almost all of our sites, we have really good relationships between the CRNAs and the anesthesiologists. I have a very close working relationship with the CRNA consultant, and on a lot of our deployments, some of our deployments are either or, anesthesiologist or CRNA. I think we've done a good job of making anesthesiologists relevant by jumping on those whenever we can. And when we can't fill them, the CRNAs have done a great job of helping us out. But because of that, the Air Force has seen fit to increase the numbers of anesthesiologists. I think from all of our sites, looking at how things work at each of our different MTFs, things work best if we treat each other as colleagues and realize that each group comes with their individual strengths and one is not superior over the other. As long as we don't act like prima donnas and talk down to our CRNA colleagues, things have worked very smoothly. We've been able to fill all of our missions back at home as well as in our deployment settings. And that's my goal going forward, is to maintain that camaraderie between the two specialties rather than allowing the tension that is there. It's there in our country, but I don't want it to grow at any of our military MTFs.
I'll echo that. I've been at different MTFs where there's been, historical beefs or rivalries. I've seen a lot of that go away as we lose a lot of senior people, and we're getting more young faces in now, especially here at BAMC. And so I would say the cooperating environment is very positive, and each understands what the other brings to the fighting force. And I think it's really us understanding as anesthesiologists really what we bring to the table as far as operational medicine. And I see that as two things. The advanced battlefield pain management that we train and that we maintain here, and that our job as master resuscitators. It's not just the initial hypovolemia, it's the large scale combat operations when they get sick and septic and neuroshock and all those things. You put that together, that's where you bring that expertise to help manage those couple of ORs at the Role 3. And so I think we've put weight behind that in our ICTLs and making sure that you stay relevant with your ability to do diagnostic POCUS and transesophageal echocardiography. That's something that every anesthesiologist needs to be doing on an annual basis to maintain readiness. But we recognize the value that our CRNA colleagues bring. But we're all about working together. That is what the Army sees as the future, and we do too, is being good colleagues. We're really excited to see the DHA PI on anesthesia services finally come out in its final form that will address further things at our MTFs, but we'll address those issues when that DHAPI is finally approved.
Dr. Booth, I see you have a question.
Hey, Aaron Tracy, this is Matt Haldeman. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, Matt, hello. Good to hear from you.
Hi. I have a question for all the consultants, and I'm really looking for sort of like leadership advice, and I'll try to make this short. And I want to thank Captain Hudson and Captain Cusick for the guidance they've given me so far. But two major studies have come out, one out of the Defense Institute for Analysis and one out of the Center for Naval Analysis. Both of them pointed out the deficits in our readiness while staying at an MTF. And small examples are like 23 days at a civilian institution is equivalent to 1 year at an MTF for emergency medicine, critical care, general surgeons. And the Center for Naval Analysis looked at Southcom as a trauma training opportunity, and through a relationship I built with the 7th Fleet surgeon, who's now the Southcom surgeon, we started to evaluate sites down there for training for like Role 2 light maneuver or even subsets of Role 3 teams. And what we see there as a benefit is that, for example, our emergency medicine residents here, they don't do a single chest tube. They get sent to Illinois to do 6 of them in a month, and that's around $6,000, around $1,000 a chest tube. And we know how saturated the different MIL-CIV partnerships are with learners. Even our own level 1 is learner saturated a bit, as we're hearing through the conversation. And so if you can send a whole team to Southcom where the credentialing, privileging, security are already organized, you can train military unique, austere, resource limited, and even the medical logistics pieces all at the same time. And we have the concept already ready. There are Army Reserve teams that have been going down there for the last decades. Anyone that knows what a med ready or surge ready experience is like understands that. And I've presented it to the CO of our hospital and getting the expeditionary medical facility to work it into its budget for training. But there's still a bit of resistance. The MTFs want to protect any surgery that's not done here is a surgery we're missing. When I presented that to Captain Perkins at Portsmouth last week, and before I presented to the regional, like Admiral Case, to try to get all of the EMFs on board, I'd kind of like some advice. I know that Brooke Army Medical Center, the emergency medicine department there, is building programs in Honduras, but because of trainees, that's been hung up with MOUs and DHA for months to years. And so I think active duty teams, non-residency is a good first step. but I'm looking for some ideas on where to garner support as I like try to grow that program.
I've had limited experience with those, although I've been on 2 med readies and they were great experiences, but the Air Force has kind of backed off on those a little bit lately. They're trying to start them up again post-COVID. One area, though, that the Air Force is really looking into, the Air Force Surgeon General is finally starting to look favorably on the value of off-duty employment. It seems to actually be more valuable in getting us more medically ready than going to C-STARS platforms, and because as you mentioned, sitting there and fighting with the other trainees to get some hands-on experience. So we're looking at a little bit outside the box thinking with off-duty employment as well, because it doesn't cost the Air Force anything. It benefits our providers by giving them experience and confidence, as well as they're allowed to get paid for it, and that is increasing retention, I think, in the Air Force. So I know that's not quite what you were asking, but that's kind of the direction we're looking forward in the Air Force too.
Yeah, and this is Captain Cusick. Sorry, Corey, were you done?
Yes, thanks.
My apologies. But I'm aggressively interested in this topic for many reasons. So, first of all, congratulations, Commander Select Haldeman, on your recent promotion or soon-to-be promotion. Great question. Thanks for the hard work you've been doing down in, thank you for what you're doing down in Southcom with looking at these sorts of experiences and opportunities. I was the beneficiary of one of those sorts of missions back in my residency to Dominican Republic. 2 weeks of very, very high acuity, high volume peds, cleft lip, cleft palate, burn scar revision surgeries. I worked with halothane. We had to wash our tubes between cases. It was phenomenal. I had 2 Pierre Rabans, 2 Treacher Collins, tons of Down syndrome kids. It really sold me on the value of those sorts of things. And then to echo Dr. Bodley about the off-duty employment, definitely see the need and the benefit of it. For instance, I just started down here, but I've also started working at West Jeff Medical Center, which is a high volume place, not particularly academic, which means you're not necessarily competing with residents for getting procedures. So first day there, I've got a double lumen tube. I've got 15 endo cases. I've got 3 central lines I put in a single day. It's phenomenal to be in a place that has the need for production. Not to overdo it, but we definitely need to get things where you feel comfortable maintaining your skills and continue to put the numbers away so the KSAs are taken care of. Now the crux of this, the difficulty we're going to have, and these are the things that I'm trying to message out to the leadership, is the off-duty employment needs to be regulated such that it is useful. It needs to not be, I'm going to this sleepy center to go to sleep all night and make money. It needs to be, what are the cases you're actually producing there? Let me see them. If it's not that, then I want you to go to a place that's higher yield. It needs to be something that's intense and exhausting. And on the basis of that, if your place of duty needs to be, Monday morning starts at your civilian facility, I think that's a phenomenal idea. You may have to be on call for me on Saturday, but that's reasonable as well. So that's my thoughts on that. Over.
Thanks, Captain Cusick. Anyone else in the audience have any questions or issues they want to bring forward while we have the consultants on the line? Their time is pretty valuable, so being able to ask them whatever you need now may save you a lot of emails later. All right, perfect. Well, failing that, thank you so much, Dr. Bodley, Dr. Cusick, Dr. Petzkowski, Dr. Hodgson, Dr. Hudson, Dr. Ruffin, Dr. Dwyer, Dr. Liu. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and your expertise. It has been a pleasure. I hope everyone has a wonderful night.
Thanks, Aaron, and thanks,
Great job,
everyone.
Aaron. This was fantastic getting everybody together. Thank you.